So this is my 2001 Ford F350 Super Duty. It's got a 7.3 Powerstroke turbo diesel. It's one of the last years they made it. I bought it 2 years ago on Craigslist, and it came with the Norwled Flatbed you see on it, and it had front and rear air lockers from ARB, and had a worn winch, ARB bumper. It's pretty much totally dialed for traveling with a flatbed camper, except I didn't want to do that. I think that having a flatbed camper kind of limits the usefulness of a camper. So you can see on my truck I have these boxes on the side and the bottom, because when I'm camping I like to bring a bunch of shit with me, whether it's like hunting gear or surfing gear or fishing gear or snowboarding gear or whatever. I like to be able to store it outside of my living space. So that's why I have all the boxes. I found the camper also on Facebook Marketplace. It's a Fourwheel Camper Hawk, and it was specifically designed for a camper with a, what do they call it, with a step bed. So that way I can fit the boxes on the side. The boxes are from Amazon. They're like 280 bucks a piece, super generic, and I bolted them on. The one thing that is custom on this truck is the box behind the bed that holds my spare. My friend Jordan Hufnagel made that for it, and on one side it holds the spare, and the other side it holds firewood and garbage. One thing I like about having a flatbed is the drawer system in the back where the tailgate would be, and I keep all my cooking stuff in there, so all my coffee, all my food stuff, and that way it's like outside of my living space. One thing that I kind of disagree with a lot of people about when camping is I don't like to cook where I sleep, because cooking in a confined space makes all your shit smell like whatever you just cooked. And while you think it's like easy to clean up, it's like grease gets everywhere. Tim, are you gonna barf, dude? One of my favorite things to do is to go out in public land, BLM or national forest, and kind of camp wherever. So it's like largely unsupported. So I pretty much just cook outside all the time, rain, snow, whatever. And then my sleeping quarters is just like my little escape pod. One thing I have done to my truck is put in a new electrical system. It came with a, I guess it would be like 11-year-old or 12-year-old when I bought it, kind of deep cycle system from Fourwheel, and I replaced it with kind of a new modern cutting edge lithium ion system from, I think the company is called Victron. And I have solar, the factory solar, and then I also have a deployable solar panel that's like 160 watts. And the thing I really like about that is, especially in the northern hemisphere, the sun's never directly overhead. So even in places like Baja, I like to move it around so that I can get kind of peak efficiency out of it. And I don't always need it. And especially like everyone's like, well, I have solar on top. Well, it's like, well, if you're hauling surfboards or anything like that, then that kind of gets in the way of your solar panel. One thing that I've recently discovered that I'm a big fan of is using my freezer, especially on longer trips, is using my fridge as a freezer. So I'll keep a bunch of food in there for my house, whether it's meat or vegetables or fruit, and then I'll take it out and thaw it out the day before. And I mean, one thing cool about that is you can have ice cream and kind of, you know, a bunch of kind of luxuries that you wouldn't normally have when you were camping. And I definitely buy into the idea that if you're uncomfortable when you're car camping, something seriously is fucked. So I try to take advantage of that as possible. I like a bunch of clothes, bunch of socks, bunch of good food, nice coffee, stuff like that, because that like really kind of, I don't know, that contrast is really nice when you're out in the middle of nowhere. A game changer is definitely having a diesel heater. I've had propane heaters before, and they just don't do a good job compared to a diesel heater. So my system is plumbed into the tank, and it draws like no electricity, like an amp when it's running. and I have a Webasto, which definitely these things require maintenance. Like I had to totally take out my diesel heater and take it apart and clean it out. But when it's working, it's absolute game changer. 2 years ago, I camped when it was 0 degrees out, and I was just running the heater all night, and it was totally toasty inside. So I would definitely recommend that. One thing nice about the diesel heat versus the propane heat is it's a dry heat. So as opposed to a propane, when you burn propane, there's a lot of how do they phrase it? There's a lot of fucking condensation that makes so it's warm but it's wet. Whereas with the diesel heat, it's actually warm. You can dry out clothes. So I definitely do that. Most of the time I actually sleep with the top down, unless I'm traveling with friends, in which case I'll have the top up. But for me and my dog, it's perfect. There's like the rollover bed system that's like doubles as a couch, and I'll sleep in here with the top down. It's definitely better insulated, but also I can kind of stealth camp, so I'll sleep at truck stops or in parking lots and stuff like that. Not that this truck is remotely stealthy, but you know, having the top down kind of gives you the benefit of the doubt. So one thing I'm pretty anal about is having your truck or your camping setup be within the gross weight. So this truck has a 3,500 pound payload, which, you know, actually goes pretty fast. Despite the fact that I have a super light camper, it's like your bumper, your batteries, your fuel, your bigger tires, and I've pretty much used all of that with this thing. But, you know, it's still within that weight range. One thing I definitely think people need to wrap their brains around is the fact that this truck is not for wheeling. Like last year, I blew up the front differential on it because I was like, oh, it has air lockers. Well, just because you have air lockers doesn't mean you should actually use them. So I actually had this front differential replaced with a limited slip. The stuff that I would really prioritize is like the quality of life stuff, where it's like keeping all your food in a nice area, keeping, you know, dirty stuff. Like I'll bring steel targets and shoot them, and it's like I don't want lead dust anywhere fucking close to where my food is. So I keep them in a totally separate storage bin. It's also nice to be able to carry fuel in those things without having them external. And once again, all this stuff's lockable. So yeah, I guess this is like, you know, I've had a bunch of different rigs. I've had a Vanagon Synchro. I've had a Sprinter. I've had a Tacoma with a flatbed and a four-wheel camper. I've had a Land Cruiser. And for me, this is kind of like the best case scenario. This truck is an access cab, and I use the back seats. I have a seat delete, but I pretty much use it as like a closet. I keep kind of all my shit in there that I don't want out in the elements. So it's like all my camera gear, my hunting gear, you know, some of my surf gear, all my clothes I keep back here. And then I kind of keep all the truck support stuff in the lower boxes. So, you know, recovery gear, maintenance gear, and then in the top boxes on the driver's side, I keep all my food and cooking gear. And then on the other side is like the nasty stuff. So that's where I keep like the extra diesel fuel, stuff that I don't really care about getting dirty, fishing gear, some surf gear, stuff like that. What else? I mean, CarPlay is super nice to have in an old car. Yeah. I like having a bench seat. I do really like Shieldman seats, but having a bench seat's super nice. I don't know, I'm trying to think what else.